Welcome back! In this episode, we take on the mighty Bidean, highest point in Argyll and the most complex massif south of the Great Glen, plus its shapely sidekick, Stob Coire Sgreamhach. Along the way, we'll discover the spectacularly violent creation story of Glencoe, check out the famous Clachaig Inn, explore Torr and Grianan, and pop into the National Trust for Scotland's Glencoe Visitor Centre. If you find yourself enjoying the show, bash that like button and hit subscribe, plus the bell icon to be notified of new videos as soon as they arrive. Bidean is a mountain so complex it takes years to really comprehend and a good few hours just to clamber to its skyscraping summit. These hours are well spent, however, as this peak of the mountains or pinnacle of the mountains gives a real sense of its height from the summit ridge, the airy crags you marvelled at from down in the glen, now reduced to mere foothills in the presence of this undisputed monarch of Glencoe. At a thigh-quivering 1,150 metres, this is not only the highest Munro we've climbed on the show, but as mentioned, the highest in the area, and given its proximity to the tidal Loch Leven, is approached from Glencoe at near sea level, so you'll be feeling every metre. The gigantic north-facing trident of the Three Sisters bears an ex-Munro, Stob Coire, while the eastern extremity of this meandering massif holds its replacement on the Munro list, Stob Coire Sgreamhach, the spectacular spire we admired from the Wee Buchillia. We begin at Glencoe village by the shores of Loch Leven, following the old drove road southwards along the eastern bank of the Coe. This takes us past Carnoch and the Glencoe Memorial, Torr and the Signal Rock, and the Clachaig Inn, before turning east to eventually join the A82 opposite the start of the Munro path near Agony. The path rises gently at first over lumpy ground, giving fine views over Loch Achtriochtan to Unnich. The picturesque waterfalls beckon the walker upward with increasing gradient to a copse of birch trees, hence the Grianan, that conceal a very, emphasis on the very, easy rock step. Above this, the second tier rises to another, larger waterfall, but to reach it, the path zigzags up an even steeper slope. You'll be glad when you reach the perch beside the waterfall, from where it's best admired. Above the waterfall lies the entrance to Grianan itself, a suddenly more confined gully. This is the third tier, and while a path runs rather precariously up among the rubble to the left, most will prefer to make their way up the floor of the gully beside the stream, rather than struggling needlessly up and down steep scree. Before long, a large boulder blocks the gully, creating a little waterfall, and the fourth tier is here marked by the junction of the Altnambea and another stream coming down from our route. The path winds its way into the montane section, and the penultimate challenge of the fifth tier, a wide boulder field in front of a stony, zigzagging path bearing right up to the skyline. The Bialach of Unsworth rewards with a jaw-dropping panorama, the western seaboard dramatically revealed at the last minute, along with a fine view over to Ben Nevis and the Unnich. Less pleasing to some will be the extent to which the ridge now steepens up ahead and narrows as it begins to climb to Stob Coire, but you'll be glad to know it's not as gnarly as it looks in good conditions. Once the scree is climbed to the top of Stob Coire, the twin summits of Bidean appear ahead, and the path shows them off to spectacular effect before rising to the west summit. This plateau must have fooled many a bagger in a pea super, its broad expanse far enough away from the true summit to remain completely invisible in mist. Said true summit lies eastward across a dip in the ridge, and a short clamber up the rocks brings you to the pinnacle of the glen. Continuing along the fairly narrow ridge to the east summit, the descent and reascent to Stob Coire Sgreamhach becomes apparent. Descent down to the Bialach is loose and moderately steep in places, but very straightforward outside of winter conditions. The ascent of Stob Coire Sgreamhach's west ridge is similarly short and sweet, with only a minor rock band about halfway up, causing any hands to be removed from pocket. Before you know it, the spectacular summit of Stob Coire Sgreamhach is reached, and if you're lucky enough to have good visibility, a panorama that beats even the largest IMAX screen. There are indeed a plethora of routes to the summit of Bidean, but this is the only one that doesn't require extended handwork. We'll look at a selection of alternative routes later in the show. In winter, Bidean becomes a savage mountaineering arena, blasted from both sides with easterly winds from Ranach Moor and the brutal Atlantic westerlies from the Firth of Lorne. This combination of height, exposure and climate makes it a very dangerous proposition by any route in winter, and is unfortunately one of the deadliest mountains in Scotland, partly due to its accessibility, but partly due to its terrain, complexity and exposure. Far too many lives have been lost on the hill, so please make sure you know what you're doing and have winter experience before you go anywhere near this mountain. Glencoe village is basically a long straight street between Loch Leven and the Bridge of Coe, with a modestly sized community around it. At the eastern end, it melds into the ancient dwelling of Carnach, a Clachaig Inn once home to Bian, chief of the MacDonalds in Glencoe, and a short detour south before the bridge leads you to the atmospheric memorial to the massacre. Returning to the main street and continuing over the Bridge of Coe brings us to the Clachaig Road, or the old Glen Coe Road. An ancient route, this former drove track leads us beside the River Coe for a couple of miles amid beautiful natural woodland. This was the main route into Glencoe basically until the 1930s. In the 1800s, Telford's Road followed this, as we'll see further on. The busy A82 instead follows a lower and somewhat longer route to cater for such large amounts of traffic. Our first objective is well seen from the road when the trees occasionally part. Stob Coire towers majestically before the observer, a mere rampart of the mighty rock citadel that awaits us. What's happening, folks? Here we are, further along to the west in Glencoe. Just a little lock-in in between the Signal Rock and Bidean up here. Now this route certainly isn't a case of, which one is the Munro, or where is the Munro located about? It is up there. Now we're going to ascend to the skyline just behind that mass here, which is called Unsworth, or the nose. I'm going to head up to the Bialach in between that and Stob Coire, or a peak of the corrie of the birch trees. From there, it's a relatively simple stroll up to the summit of Stob Coire, and from there to Bidean, and beyond to the peak of the awful corrie, Stob Coire Sgreamhach. Let's head on down there. Behind me, you can see a Sgreamhach, peak of the Fane, or cliff of the Fane, who we'll be learning about in the next episode. and Torr, literally the rise or the small hill, is a modest but pleasant circuit around the natural woodlands beside the Clachaig Inn. A short, signposted detour from this circuit brings the walker to Grianan, the Stone of the Sun, or as it's popularly known, the Signal Rock. However, as the rather pithy information board pre-warned you, this destination may prove somewhat anticlimactic, given it's surrounded on all sides by dense foliage, blocking the view. However, its striking geology provides significant interest underfoot, betraying its likely origin as either a piece of ejecta or pyroclastic flow from the ancient Glencoe supervolcano, more on which later in the programme. As its English name suggests, Grianan was most likely used at the fire rituals of Beltane and Savain to mark the beginning and end of the shealing season respectively. It was also used by Clan Inn to alert residents of the Glen to a meeting, foray, or combat operation. Some people who should really know better argue that it was used to signal the beginning of the Glencoe massacre, but this assertion makes absolutely no sense and is almost certainly made up. The Clachaig Inn is a modern institution with its roots in serving climbers tackling the many crags of Glencoe, but it's likely that there was at least a dwelling or meeting house here back in the days of the Gaeltacht. Reality check alert, the sign on the door, "No Hawkers, No Campbells," was added in the 1960s, as a joke by the way. The inn has no connection with, mainly because it didn't exist at the time of the massacre. What it obviously does have a connection to is the nearby Clachaig Gully, a gigantic scar hewn into the cliff of the Fane that offers a uniquely masochistic challenge to those so inclined, beside which a path used to lead down from Sgreamhach as a means of early pub access, particularly for people having completed Agony. We say used to because it's so steep and horrendously eroded as to be basically a death trap now. The gully itself is complex and heavily vegetated, with water pouring onto your head in varying volumes, but hey, some people are into this kind of thing. No, really.
Oofed. Behind me here you can see that Agony has appeared.
Its gnarly ramparts piercing the blue sky like great black teeth. At the far end there is Ambodach, the Old Man, then the Munros, Muelgeric, the Crazy Pinnacles, and Stob Coire, with the summit of the second Munros, Sgreamhach, obscured. Beyond the Clachaig Inn, the road bends east for a mile or so, showing off the majesty of its surroundings before crossing the Telford Bridge and immediately joining the A82, a very busy major road which care should be taken in crossing. Go to the right hand end of the rock cut opposite and walk behind the barriers to a very easily missed gate that leads onto the open hillside above.
Well, here we are on the path proper, up towards Grianan. You got a magnificent Agony up there, Black Ridge. Basically going to zigzag up these foothills here and then ascend beside the waterfall. So without further ado, let's bash on up there. Well, here we are on the path up to Stob Coire up there. And you can see a spectacular waterfall up there. We're going to ascend on the right hand side of that, on those zigzags, and up into Coire itself, from where we'll take a right hand turn up onto the ridge behind Unsworth up there. Let's get cracking. Well, true to its name, Coire, or its head wall at least, got a nice thicket of birch and hazel. Very nice. Just round this corner, we'll see the final pull up to the quarry itself. Magnificent crags up there of Agony.
Seriously, this is listed in guidebooks as a scramble, and therefore making it grade 1, but as you know, I can be a bit of a sissy when it comes to exposure, and trust me, this is nothing to worry about.
Well, here we are in the upper tier of the head wall, just making our way over the brow. There you can see someone just making their way over it just now, in silhouette. Got a stunning bit of composition here. Nature providing us with the incredible ramparts of Agony and this gorgeous little waterfall. Well, rather large waterfall in fact in front of it. With those hazel and birchwood around it. Beautiful. Here we are, having zigzagged our way up, and we're now about to enter the intensely dramatic Coire here, and Stob Coire up there, towering over it there. Look at that! That's not even the Munros. Our path is basically straight up the cliff face there. Nah, I'm only joking, don't worry. It's up this bit here. No, again, I'm only joking, don't worry. We're gonna follow the path around this corner here, and there's a somewhat less intimidating grass slope. Well, here we are into the third tier. Coire is actually to the left here, at the top of this little kind of ravine bit here, Our route continues straight ahead up these lumps and bumps up onto that Bialach between Unsworth and Stob Coire, which looks pretty formidable, doesn't it? However, it's largely the effect of perspective. It's not quite as far away or as monstrous as it looks. Well, here we are at yet another tier of Grianan. However, the skyline is starting to get a little bit closer now. Just around this rocky knoll up here, and then up some steep slope, I would imagine. Just up to that little dip there between the rougher side on the right and the kind of pointy crags. So far the path has been absolutely superb as ever in Glencoe. At the moment it seems to be NTS have really done some fantastic work and made these hills a great deal more fun to access. So again, hats off to you. For now, let's bash onto this Bialach. Well, here we are at last at the final tier of Grianan, and the Bialach and Torr up there. Not too far to go, only about 100 metres. Now if that boulder field was giving you the no feeling, don't worry, the path actually winds its way through it so you don't have to negotiate it manually, shall we say. And here we are, the Bialacant throne. And as you can see behind me, the view to the west is pretty incredible. Look at that. Loch Leven down here, Loch Lynn over there. You can see Benavere, the two peaks there. Sgurdonal, the furthest one. No prizes for translating that. And Ant Throne there, majestic pinnacle. Looking over at the Ben. And smashing visibility again up to the north. And looking over there, you can see Benmore of Mull. Not bad. And behind me here, we've got Stob Coire. And behind it, Bidean. Onward. We are making our way up the west ridge of Stob Coire and absolutely gorgeous views down to the southwest there. Marvellous, isn't it? Oofed. The golden light out to sea there. Over there you can see Sgreamhach. And just hiding round the side of Stob Coire is the king of the hill, Bidean. Well, here we are on the summit slopes of Stob Coire. It just keeps on going. Not too far now to the main ridge itself. And can't moan though, with this stunning backdrop. Glen there you can see. Ben Trillichan, Ben Hinley, Ben Scullard, Loch Creran. And there's Firth of Lorne there, looking absolutely stunning in the sunlight. Not too far to go now. See you up there. Hallelujah! Here we are, summit Stob Coire, peak of the corrie of the birch trees, and you can see the dramatic summit of Bidean. The last bit, dramatic views down there to Coire, and we are really quite high up here. You do get a feeling of that extra 100-150 metres on this mountain. Significantly taller than the majority of the Munro list. And yeah, man, look at that nasty gash right down the middle of it there. Erosion has created quite a work of art there. Speaking of which, Glen Etive, we never tire of looking at that, do we? Beautiful. And you can see the granites of Bian there reflected in the sunlight, and those of Bian Stob. You can see Clachaig Inn and Bidean between that and Miel Tree Tiernan, the Hill of the Three Lords, that little one. And over there you got Stob Coire Sgreamhach, Bidean there as well on the other side of Bian Stob. And obviously we've got the Clachaig Inn Ridge here, looking gorgeous. And as mentioned, the Firth of Lorne here, the Isle of Mull on the other side of it, and the highest point of that, the Munro and Moor of Mull. Bian over there, Sgwr Donal and Sgwr Sgreamhach. Oh yeah, smashing view of the Lochaber Hills. Ben Nevis and Ernach Moor, the giants. Over here, Stob Coire Sgreamhach. Way over in the distance, the Ben Alder group. And over there you can see Schiehallion, the head of Loch Rannoch. And got the wee Buchillia here in the foreground. Just there you can see the big one, the greatest herdsman, and Stob Sgreamhach basking in the sunlight there. Now just here, behind the ridge of Stob Coire Sgreamhach, we've got Ben Hada, the long hill. And yeah, Stob Coire Sgreamhach's north ridge here goes down to end in Ernach Du. Over there you can see the formidable face of Bian and its incredible buttresses there. No thanks, but for those adrenaline lovers out there, well, there's plenty to get your hands on up on those faces and those buttresses there. As for us, we're going to follow a more sedate route along here and then up the skyline to the King of the Hills. Let's do it. Well, here we are approaching the west summit. Double-pronged mountain like Ben Cruachan. And it's just a short skip, hopefully, over to the main summit. As you can see over there. Wow. Incredible backdrop and front drop, if you like. Just a stunning range. Bian. As you can see, we're quite a bit higher than Ernach over there. quite a bit less than this, just over the 900 something metre mark. But yeah, the last level. Let's smash on over there. Here we are, emerging atop the summit of Bidean, the summit of Glencoe. Nice pointy pinnacle, as you can see. Yeah. Mountain of mountains, 1,150 metres. In the bag. Great view. Whoa, hang on a minute. What's going on? Whoa, looks like we've hit a time warp. As you can see, when there's plenty of snow on the hill, it changes its character quite dramatically and makes it all look a lot more serious. Which is what we like sometimes, you know? As you can see, in the winter time or in the springtime, Bidean holds a hell of a lot of snow on its north-facing corries. Basically because it's in the northern hemisphere and Glencoe runs kind of west to east, so it doesn't get a lot of sunshine on these bits, as you can see behind me here. Our second objective, Stob Coire Sgreamhach over there, just over these two little rocky lumps on the way, and then there's a couple of very easy rock steps downwards, and then it's as you can see, the path snaking its way up to Stob Coire Sgreamhach over there. So without further ado, let's bash on over there. Well, as you can see, we've traversed those two bumps up on the summit ridge there, and we're just heading down here to the right of these rye-like cliffs that you can see, down to the Bian Stob Coire, and from there we're going to tackle that snaky path up to the top of Sgreamhach. A little bit windy, but not too bad, and as you can see, the exposure, there isn't any really, is there? Let's do it. Well, here we are on our way up Stob Coire Sgreamhach. Got some boulder clambering to do. Behind us, wow, look at that. Bidean, a nice icing of snow. Stob Coire looking lovely. Yeah, onwards and upwards. Hey, is that the summit I see? Don't tempt me further. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it's not a false summit, because we are pretty high again now, and as you can see, Bidean, quite a looker, isn't it? Those wonderful rye-like cliffs there, like teeth of a comb. Talking of teeth, in a cake, and a ring of stale behind it, and then the Big Ben Nebish behind it as well. Hopefully, it's the final furlong. Let's bash on up there. And here we are, the spectacular summit of Stob Coire Sgreamhach. Yo, even better view than Bian, I dare say. Because you can see Bidean from here, look at that! If a popular beer manufacturer made mountains, wow. Incredibly dramatic landscape of stone there. And you can see its violent volcanic origins writ large in those craggy escarpments. Over the back we've got a nice view south down Glen Loch Etive, and Bian Cruachan there, Bian Stob, and again looking out to sea. Lovely golden light out there in the bay of the Firth of Lorn. Beautiful. I'd buy that for $1.
It should go without saying that the best way to experience the Glencoe Visitor Centre is to visit it yourself and thus support the National Trust for Scotland's ongoing conservation and archaeological work in the Glen. A perfect rainy day destination, the revamped Visitor Centre has a cafe, screening room, short local trails, and its pièce de résistance, the lovingly recreated traditional turf house, as well as visual exhibits, audio installations, and a wealth of social and natural history. For example, recent National Trust for Scotland archaeological excavations at Agony have revealed new insights about the Clachaig Inn's layout and fresh evidence that helps us better understand the lives of its residents at the time of the Gaeltacht. As alluded to in previous episodes, Glencoe's sculptures of stone have an explosive origin story. The songs of the Celtic tell of great creatures and spirits that tore the land asunder and shaped it to their will. It's not hard to imagine why, given the inhabitants of Glencoe would have lived among such grandeur, they assumed its astonishing rock architecture had been wrought by the giant masons of an ancient lost world. We don't, in inverted commas, know beyond doubt that they were wrong in this belief, of course, but we do have a lot of evidence that suggests a more grounded, if no less epic, explanation, and this is geology. Around 400 million years ago, collision of tectonic plates along what we now call the Great Glen and the Highland Boundary Fault caused volcanism on a scale so violent it would have shaken the entire planet. Two of the largest super volcanoes were in Lochaber. One was Ben Nevis and the other Glencoe, both of which appear to have emitted some of the most powerful explosions in the history of the Earth. These unimaginably violent volcanic events were staggered rather than occurring in one massive eruption. As viewers will remember, granite is intrusive igneous rock because it forms from magma underground. The other kind of igneous rock is called extrusive, and this forms from magma that has broken the surface and become lava. This is present in much of the complex geography of the Glencoe and Lochaber mountains. The dramatic faces are comprised of both intrusive and extrusive igneous rocks, because what created them was extremely violent and incredibly fast. Though not a geologist, John Preble puts into words the scale and majesty of the result of these processes in Glencoe. It is a deep scar left by the agony of creation, an arm bent at the elbow, with sinews of quartz and muscles of granite. Indeed, mention Glencoe to a geologist and chances are that their eyes will light up. Its serrated crags and bizarre rocks tell a rich and dramatic history of fire and ice. Around 420 million years ago, complex tectonic plate interactions resulted in features called grabens and horsts forming between two fault lines. This is what occurred when Laurentia and Avalonia smashed together, subducting the Iapetus Ocean beneath them. Here, magma from the Earth's mantle rose through the cracks of this graben, and a stratovolcano developed in Glencoe, centred roughly around the summit of Stob Coire Sgreamhach. The volcano itself measured around 14 by 8 kilometres. That's right, the entirety of the Glencoe massif, if you like, was one giant volcano. Its regular eruptions covered the surrounding area in andesite. Eventually the eruptions from the stratovolcano ceased, but heat and pressure continued to build in the magma chamber. The intensity of these forces changed the composition of the surface andesite into rhyolite, effectively baking it into the porous, crumbling rock we see in the towers of Bidean, Eich, and the Buchilias. Over hundreds of thousands of years, streams and lakes would have formed on the surface above the chamber, but you guessed it, it was only a matter of time until something cataclysmic was going to happen. Once this gigantic cavernous magma chamber was virtually emptied, the weight of the surface above eventually led to the magma chamber collapsing completely, exposing around 14 by 8 kilometres of white-hot magma to a lower pressure, moisture-rich atmosphere. As any physicist watching will know, two things would then have happened simultaneously and very quickly. Firstly, the violent ejection of the pressurised contents of the magma chamber, and secondly, flash boiling of all moisture in said square kilometre and the air above it, as the searing heat from the continued flow of white-hot magma instantly turns water into steam. Now, turning water into steam requires the transfer of energy, and an exponential increase in volume. It is the speed of this transition that can produce an enormously violent result. The resulting explosions were so enormous that the shockwaves they created would have reverberated around the globe, and that is no exaggeration. If it were to occur now, not just the ash and smoke, but the ejecta and debris field itself would have extended into northern Europe. Just think about that for a second. At ground zero, the rock was near instantly concertinaed into the ridges of the Buchilias, Eich and Bidean. No life within 250 kilometres would have survived, and the landscape would have been reduced to a black, lifeless void covered in almost 200 vertical metres of ash. This ash and rhyolite gradually became fused into a new element unique to Glencoe, ignimbrite. In all, over 350 cubic kilometres were ejected by the Glencoe supervolcano. This is a staggering amount. In layman's terms, it's roughly the volume of 12 Munros. The ejecta from the continuous volcanism fell to earth and cooled on top of the underlying rock, resulting in the tears of Bidean and the strange flowing stone seen here and on the top of the signal rock down in the glen, which itself may well have been an enormous piece of debris or ejecta shot from the explosions themselves. At the risk of labouring the point, the sheer scale, violence and speed at which this all occurred is impossible to imagine, but among the razor edges and crumbling rhyolite towers of the Glencoe Munros, we gain some sense of the savage, monumental forces by which this famous landscape was forged. As mentioned earlier, there are more routes to the summit of Bidean than, to coin a phrase, you'll have had hot dinners. However, these are a little more tricky than our featured route, usually involving some combination of scrambling, exposure, or all-out rock climbing. The most obvious alternative is the connoisseur's route, a long approach climbing to Courgaval, traversing said Corrie of the Bounty, and braving the steep Scree Gully to Bialach. However, if there is snow in the gully, this is basically a near-vertical, front-pointing ice climb up rock-hard snow slab, and thus the domain of confident and experienced winter Munroists only. Alternatively, you can turn left at the fourth tier from our route into Grianan proper and take your chances on the steep, loose slopes to the Bialach with Stob Coire Sgreamhach. Then scramble up the flank of Diamond Buttress to Bidean's summit, which certainly puts the X in exposure. You can wind your way up the grassy balconies of the Grianan zigzags, then take on the hair-raisingly sharp north ridge of Stob Coire Sgreamhach and beyond to Bidean as per the previous alternative route. You can even take an ingenious route up the back of Stob Coire Sgreamhach from Glen Etive. This involves some fiddly and downright dirty scrambling early on beside the waterfall. However, once this obstacle is passed, the rest of the walk is on steep but moderate slopes. I here defer to author and friend of the show David Unsworth, whose recent book, Bian and the Three Sisters of Glencoe, 31 Walks Around Glencoe's Finest Mountain Range, does a far better job at explaining these routes than we have time to here. You will find no better hill walking guide to the myriad routes and features of this unique Alpinesque massif. David has crafted a masterwork of compelling prose, practical and methodical advice, and photorealistic drawings of astonishing, painstaking detail. So if you're planning to visit Bidean and fancy a more challenging way to the summit that doesn't involve actual rock climbing, or you simply enjoy great mountain artwork, David's fantastic book will have all bases covered. And if you'd like to pick up a copy, the link is included in the video description. Thanks so much for your time. If you found this video useful, feel free to share it with people who you think would find it interesting. And as always, smash that like button if you haven't already, and hit subscribe so that you'll always see new videos on the day of their arrival. In terms of time and money, these shows are not inexpensive to make, so any financial help is much appreciated. The easiest way to do this is to press our shiny new Super Thanks button, located just below the video, where you can donate as little or as much as you'd like. If you want to make a longer term investment in the show, the best way is to go to Patreon and sign up for as little as £3 a month, where you'll be able to get ad-free videos. Yes, ad-free. Ah, bliss. Next time, we'll tackle the Cliff of the Fian, Sgornam Fianne. Yep, that's how it's pronounced. Grow up. Until then, enjoy your adventures.